Jamal Washington walked through the halls of Westridge High School with his eyes on the floor. The 14-year-old freshman kept his shoulders hunched and his backpack close. He moved quickly between classes, trying not to be noticed. Being noticed meant trouble. The bell rang as Jamal slid into his seat in the back corner of Mr. Powell's algebra class. He took out his notebook, flipping past pages filled with complex equations to find a blank one. Those hidden pages contained advanced calculus, quantum physics formulas, and designs for something that could change the world, but no one could know about that yet. "Hey, Einstein," a voice whispered from behind. It was Greg Peterson, a senior, who seemed to make hurting Jamal his daily mission. "Did your mom steal those shoes from the trash can?" Jamal said nothing, pushing his worn sneakers under his desk. His mother worked 2 jobs, hospital cleaning during days and convenience store shifts at night. They had what they needed, but never anything extra. "I asked you a question," Greg said, kicking the back of Jamal's chair. "No," Jamal said quietly. "She didn't." Mr. Powell started writing basic algebra problems on the board. "Who can solve for x in this equation?" Jamal knew the answer instantly. In fact, he had mastered algebra when he was 9 years old, learning from library books and free online courses when the apartment internet worked. But he waited, watching other students struggle to raise their hands. "Jamal," Mr. Powell said, looking surprised to see his hand up. "Would you like to try?" Jamal stood and walked to the board. He could solve this in his sleep, but he had to be careful. Last year at his old school, a teacher had become suspicious of his abilities and wanted to test him. That kind of attention could ruin everything. So Jamal purposely made a small mistake in the middle of the solution. "That's not quite right," Mr. Powell said, sounding disappointed. "Anyone else?" As Jamal returned to his seat, Greg stuck out his foot. Jamal saw it coming but let himself trip anyway, falling hard onto the classroom floor. The class erupted in laughter. "Oops," Greg said with a smile. "Watch where you're going, genius." Mr. Powell barely looked up. Everyone settled down. "Jamal, back to your seat." At lunch, Jamal sat alone as usual. He pulled out a worn paperback book about theoretical physics while eating his sandwich. The cafeteria was loud around him, but he lost himself in ideas about space, time, and energy. His mind filled with calculations and possibilities. "What are you reading, space boy?" Greg and his friends Calvin Smith and Derek Johnson surrounded Jamal's table. Before Jamal could react, Calvin grabbed the book. "Advanced Theoretical Physics?" Calvin read, making his voice sound nerdy. "You trying to be smart or something? Everyone knows you can't even do basic algebra." "Please give it back," Jamal said. "It's from the library." Greg took the book from Calvin and flipped through it. "Why are there all these notes in the margins? Did you write this stuff?" Jamal reached for the book, panic rising in his chest. Those notes contained his ideas, his calculations, his theories about a new type of space propulsion system. "Give it back," Jamal said, his voice stronger now. "Or what?" Greg laughed, holding the book higher. "What's a poor nobody like you going to do about it?" Ms. Daniels, the physics teacher, walked by at that moment. She was new to the school this year, and the only teacher who seemed to notice things. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" she asked, her eyes moving from the boys to the book in Greg's hand. "No problem," Greg said, dropping the book onto Jamal's tray. "Just borrowing a book." "Well, lunch is almost over. You should head to your next class," Ms. Daniels said firmly. The boys walked away, but not before Greg leaned down and whispered, "This isn't over, Einstein." Ms. Daniels looked at Jamal with concern. "Are those boys bothering you, Jamal?" "No, ma'am," he said, quickly putting the book in his backpack. The last thing he needed was a teacher looking too closely at him or the book. "That's some advanced reading," she commented, glancing at his backpack. "Are you interested in physics?" "Just curious," he said with a shrug. "The pictures are cool." Ms. Daniels didn't look convinced. "Well, if you ever want to talk about physics, or anything else, my classroom is open during study hall." After she left, Jamal let out a breath that was close. Nobody could know what he was really doing, not even kind teachers like Ms. Daniels. The rest of the school day dragged on. In each class, Jamal was careful to be average, Not too smart, not too dumb, just invisible enough to avoid questions. The real work happened at home, in secret. When the final bell rang, Jamal hurried out before Greg and his friends could find him. He took a longer route home, walking through the park instead of taking the main streets. The early autumn air felt good after being trapped in classrooms all day. At home, the small apartment was empty. His mom wouldn't be back until midnight. Jamal made himself a snack and sat at the kitchen table to do his regular homework first, the simple stuff his teachers assigned. He finished it all in 20 minutes. Then he went to his bedroom and closed the door. He moved aside the hanging clothes in his small closet, revealing the wall behind them. There, taped carefully in rows, were hundreds of pages of calculations, diagrams, and notes. His real work. Jamal pulled out a flashlight and a new notebook. He sat cross-legged in the closet and began working on his latest problem. How to create a stable energy field that could bend space-time using minimal power. If he could solve it, his propulsion system might actually work. Hours passed as he wrote, erased, and calculated. This was where he felt free. This was where he wasn't the poor kid in worn-out shoes. This was where he was himself, a mind exploring the universe. When he heard his mother's key in the door around midnight, he quickly put everything away and pretended to be asleep. Lisa Washington quietly opened his bedroom door. "Jamal?" she whispered. He pretended to wake up. "Hi, Mom." "How was school today?" she asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. Despite working 16 hours, she still made time to check on him. "Fine," he said. "Just normal." "Any trouble with those boys you mentioned before?" "No," Jamal lied. "Everything's fine." She smiled and kissed his forehead. "I'm so proud of you. Baby. Getting good grades, staying out of trouble. You're going to have a better life than I did." If only she knew. Someday, when his work was ready, he would tell her everything. Someday, he would change both their lives. But for now, he had to keep his genius hidden. From the bullies, from the teachers, from everyone. Tomorrow would be another day of pretending to be average at school. Another day of harassment from Greg and his friends. Another day of hiding who he really was. But at night, in the secret laboratory of his closet, he would keep working toward the stars. 3 weeks had passed since Greg Peterson destroyed Jamal's science notebook. The torn pages and cruel words still burned in Jamal's memory. But the incident had sparked something in him, a determination to no longer hide in the shadows. That morning, Jamal sat eating breakfast while his mother prepared for her day shift at the hospital. "There's a science competition at school," Jamal said, keeping his voice casual. "NASA is running it. The top winner gets a scholarship." Lisa Washington looked up from packing her lunch. "That sounds wonderful. Are you thinking of entering?" Jamal nodded. "Maybe. It's about space technology." "You should try," his mother said, smiling. "You've always loved looking at the stars. If only she knew how much more than looking he had been doing." "The deadline is next week," Jamal said. "I might need to stay late at the library a few times." "Just be careful coming home," his mother said, concern crossing her tired face. She kissed his forehead before heading out the door. "I believe in you, Jamal." At school, posters about the NASA Young Innovators competition covered the walls. Most students walked past without a second glance, but Jamal stopped to read every detail. The competition asked for new ideas in space travel, habitat design, or resource utilization. In physics class, Ms. Daniels discussed the competition with excitement. "This is a rare opportunity," she told the class. "NASA scientists will actually review your submissions. The national winner gets a $50,000 college scholarship and an internship at the Space Center." From the back of the room, Greg snorted. "Like, anyone from this school has a chance." Ms. Daniels frowned at him. "With that attitude, certainly not you, Mr. Peterson." After class, Jamal stayed behind, waiting until the other students left. "Ms. Daniels," he asked quietly, "can people submit to the competition without using their real name?" She looked surprised. "You're interested in entering?" "Maybe," he said, eyes on the floor. "But I don't want anyone to know." Ms. Daniels studied him carefully. The rules say entries need real names for the official paperwork, but you could request confidentiality. Why would you want to hide your entry, Jamal? He didn't answer directly. Is the school library open late today? Until 5, she said. But Jamal, if you're working on something for this competition, I could help you. I have a doctorate in astrophysics, you know. Jamal blinked in surprise. You do? Yes, she smiled. Before becoming a teacher. So if you need help with ideas, I have ideas, Jamal said quickly. I just need computer access to type them up. For the next week, Jamal divided his time between the school library and his closet laboratory. At the library, he used computers to research existing propulsion systems, confirming that his ideas were truly original. At home, he refined his calculations, double-checking every equation. His Washington Drive concept centered on creating a controlled field that could bend space-time around a vessel, allowing for movement without traditional rocket propulsion. His breakthrough came in realizing that certain quantum relationships could be exploited to create the field using minimal energy. On Thursday afternoon, Jamal was working in the library when he heard familiar voices approaching. Look who's still here, Greg said, walking up with Calvin and Derek. Working on your space project? Jamal quickly switched screens from his complex equations to a simple Word document. It's just homework, he said. Calvin peered at the screen. Looks boring, just like you. Leave him alone, a girl's voice said. Jamal turned to see Zoe Reynolds, a quiet girl from his English class. She rarely spoke to anyone, much like Jamal himself. Mind your business, Greg told her. I'm trying to study, Zoe said. You're being loud. The librarian looked up from her desk. Is there a problem? Greg backed away. No problem. We were just leaving. He leaned close to Jamal. See you tomorrow, genius. After they left, Zoe moved to the computer beside Jamal's. They bother you a lot, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm used to it, Jamal replied. That doesn't make it right. She opened her backpack and took out a textbook. Are you really doing the NASA competition? Jamal hesitated. Yes. Cool, she said simply, and opened her book. They worked side by side in silence for an hour. When Jamal finally stood to leave, Zoe looked up. Good luck with your project, she said. The next evening, Jamal finished his entry. 37 pages of detailed diagrams, equations, and explanations. He had used a school computer to create the final document, saving it to a USB drive. Now he just needed to submit it before the midnight deadline. He waited until his mother left for her night shift, then walked to the public library downtown. They had faster computers and better printers. Jamal found an empty workstation in the corner and plugged in his drive. The submission form asked for his full name, age, and school. Jamal hesitated, then typed J. Washington and checked the box requesting confidentiality during the review process. He attached his document, took a deep breath, and clicked Submit. A confirmation message appeared. Thank you for your submission to the NASA Young Innovators Competition. All entries will be reviewed within 30 days. On the way home, Jamal felt lighter than he had in years. Even if nothing came of it, he had put his real work out into the world for the first time. No more hiding his intelligence, at least not completely. Over the next 3 weeks, Jamal continued his routine at school. He answered questions wrong on purpose, kept his head down in the hallways, and avoided Greg when possible. But something had changed inside him. He had taken the first step toward being himself. Then one morning, Principal Harris called an assembly. The entire school gathered in the auditorium, buzzing with curiosity. Westridge High has received some extraordinary news, Principal Harris announced, beaming. One of our students has been selected as a finalist in the NASA Young Innovators competition. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Ms. Daniels, seated on stage with the other teachers, was smiling broadly. We don't know which student yet, Principal Harris continued. The entry was submitted confidentially. But NASA representatives will be visiting our school next week to meet with this promising young scientist. From his seat in the back row, Jamal's heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. Finalist? He had only hoped his ideas would be read, not selected. They've informed me that this student's work shows exceptional promise, Principal Harris said. Something about a revolutionary propulsion system. Greg and his friends sat a few rows ahead, laughing and nudging each other. Probably some nerd. From the science club, Greg said loudly. Jamal stared at his hands, trying to control his breathing. NASA was coming here, to meet him, to talk about his ideas. After the assembly, students filled the hallways with excited chatter. Who could it be? Most guesses centered on the known science winners. The robotics team captain, the chemistry whiz, the senior heading to MIT. No one looked at Jamal. As he walked to his next class, Ms. Daniels fell into step beside him. Exciting news, isn't it? She said casually. Yes, Jamal managed. I wonder who it could be, she continued, watching him carefully. Someone with a brilliant mind, clearly. For a moment, Jamal thought about telling her. But what if Greg found out? What if everyone started treating him differently before he was ready? I guess we'll find out next week, he said instead. Ms. Daniels nodded. Yes, we will. She paused outside her classroom door. Jamal, whatever happens next week, remember that real intelligence isn't just about having good ideas. It's about having the courage to share them with the world. As she walked away, Jamal wondered if she already knew his secret, and he wondered what would happen when everyone else found out too. The day NASA came to Westridge High, the school buzzed with excitement. Classes were shortened, and by 1 o'clock, all students were directed to the auditorium. News vans parked outside, and a local reporter interviewed Principal Harris at the entrance. Jamal slipped into the auditorium, taking his usual seat in the back row, his stomach twisted with nerves. He had barely slept the night before, imagining all the ways this could go wrong. What if they thought his ideas were stupid once they met him? What if everyone laughed? His mother had noticed his anxiety that morning. Are you feeling sick, Jamal? She had asked, touching his forehead. Just tired, he'd answered. He couldn't tell her about today. Not yet. The auditorium filled quickly. Teachers tried to maintain order as students jostled for seats, everyone talking at once. Greg and his friends took seats near the front, probably hoping to be on camera. Principal Harris stepped to the microphone, raising his hands for quiet. Today is a historic day for Westridge High, he announced. We have special guests from NASA who are here to recognize one of our students for extraordinary achievement. He gestured to 3 people seated on stage. Please welcome Dr. Olivia Bennett, Chief Scientist of the Advanced Propulsion Laboratory, Dr. Marcus Lee, Director of Education Outreach, and Colonel Frank Adams, former astronaut and current NASA Administrator. The students applauded politely. Jamal stared at Dr. Bennett, recognizing her name from research papers he had read. She was a legend in propulsion physics. Thank you, Principal Harris, Dr. Bennett said, taking the microphone. She was tall, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that scanned the audience. We're here about something exciting. The NASA Young Innovators Competition received over 15,000 entries this year. We've never seen such creativity and scientific understanding from young minds. Colonel Adams took the microphone next. But one entry stood above all others, a theoretical model for a new type of propulsion system that frankly left our scientists stunned. Dr. Lee stepped forward. This design, which the creator called the Washington Drive, uses principles that our own researchers have only begun to explore. If it works as theorized, it could revolutionize space travel. Whispers filled the auditorium. Jamal's hands gripped his seat tightly. Dr. Bennett returned to the microphone. We're here to meet the young scientist behind this breakthrough. According to the confidential entry, they attend this school. The submission was signed only J. Washington. All eyes began searching the room. Principal Harris looked confused. We don't have any students in our science program with that name, he said. Ms. Daniels stood up from her seat with the teachers. J could be a first initial, not a last name, she suggested. Dr. Bennett nodded. That's what we thought. Would J. Washington please stand up? Jamal remained frozen in his seat. This was the moment he had both wanted and feared. Everyone would know. Everything would change. Maybe they're absent today? Principal Harris suggested when no one stood. "Let me tell you more about this remarkable theory," Dr. Bennett said, bringing up slides on the auditorium screen. Diagrams and equations filled the screen. Jamal's diagrams and equations. "This propulsion concept creates a controlled distortion in space-time," she explained. "But unlike previous theories, it solves the energy problem by using these quantum relationships." She pointed to a complex equation. "This is brilliant work, but there's actually a small error in this calculation that could be fixed by—" Before Jamal could stop himself, he called out, "The coefficient should be negative, not positive." The entire auditorium turned to look at him. Dr. Bennett peered toward the back. "Who said that?" she asked. Jamal's heart hammered in his chest. He slowly stood up, his legs shaking. "The equation works if you make the coefficient negative. It balances the field variance." Dr. Bennett studied him with intense interest. "And how would you know that, young man?" The room was completely silent now. Jamal could feel hundreds of eyes on him, including Greg's shocked stare from the front. "Because I wrote it," Jamal said, his voice growing stronger. "I'm Jay Washington, Jamal Washington." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Principal Harris looked stunned. Ms. Daniels was smiling proudly. "Would you come down to the stage, Mr. Washington?" Dr. Bennett asked. Jamal made his way down the aisle. As he passed Greg, their eyes met. For once, Greg had nothing to say. On stage, Dr. Bennett shook his hand, then turned to the audience. "This is exactly why NASA runs this competition. Brilliant minds can be found anywhere, in any school, in any neighborhood." Dr. Lee handed Jamal a certificate. "Congratulations. You're not just a finalist, you're our national winner." Colonel Adams added, "The scholarship and internship are yours. But more importantly, NASA wants to develop your ideas. The Washington Drive could be the future of space exploration." Principal Harris finally recovered his voice. "Jamal is one of our—" He paused, clearly trying to remember anything about Jamal, one of our promising students. "We always knew he had potential." Ms. Daniels stepped forward. "Jamal has shown remarkable understanding in my physics class, though he's been quite modest about his abilities." After more handshakes and photos, the NASA scientists asked Jamal detailed questions about his theory. He answered with growing confidence, forgetting his fear as he discussed the science he loved. The auditorium watched in amazement as the 14-year-old freshman debated complex physics with some of NASA's top minds. When the formal presentation ended, students crowded around Jamal, asking questions and offering congratulations. Many claimed they had always been his friend, though he couldn't remember them ever speaking to him before. Greg, Calvin, and Derek stood at the edge of the crowd, looking uncomfortable. When there was a break in the circle around Jamal, Greg stepped forward. "So you were pretending to be dumb this whole time?" Greg asked, his voice lacking its usual mockery. Jamal looked at him steadily. "I wasn't pretending to be anything. I was just trying to survive." Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. He turned and walked away, followed by his friends. Zoe pushed through the crowd to reach Jamal. "I knew it was you," she said with a small smile. "No one else stays that late in the library." As the excitement continued, Principal Harris approached with his phone. "Jamal, I've called your mother. She's on her way." 20 minutes later, Lisa Washington rushed into the auditorium, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She looked confused until she saw Jamal on stage with the NASA scientist. "Mom," Jamal called, running to her. As they hugged, he whispered, "I have so much to tell you about who I really am." "I know who you are," she said, tears in her eyes. "You're my brilliant boy. I always knew you were special." Dr. Bennett approached them. "Mrs. Washington, your son has created something extraordinary. We'd like to discuss his future with you both." As they walked to a private meeting room, Jamal felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less than he was. The secret genius was secret no more. 3 months after the NASA visit, Jamal's life had changed completely. He now spent his weekends at the NASA Advanced Propulsion Laboratory, working alongside Dr. Bennett. The school had moved him to advanced classes, and Principal Harris mentioned his name in every speech to visitors. On this Monday morning, Jamal walked through the school hallways with a new confidence. Students nodded and greeted him with respect. Even teachers seemed different around him, asking his opinion or mentioning articles they thought might interest him. Jamal stopped at his new locker, which had been moved closer to his classes after the incident. The incident was what everyone called the day Greg Peterson had cornered Jamal one last time, a week after the NASA event. Greg had pushed Jamal against the wall, angry and confused about how the boy he had tormented was now the school's star. "You made me look stupid," Greg had said. But before anything could happen, Ms. Daniels and 3 other teachers appeared, drawn by the attention of watching students. Greg was suspended for 2 weeks, and when he returned, he stayed far away from Jamal. As Jamal opened his locker, Zoe approached. Since the NASA event, she had become his closest friend, the only person who treated him the same as before. "Ready for the physics test?" she asked. "I guess," Jamal said with a small smile. He was taking senior-level physics now, but the material was still far below what he worked on at NASA. "Dr. Bennett called my mom last night," he told Zoe as they walked to class. "They want me to join a special summer program. Engineers and scientists from all over the country will be working on the prototype." "That's amazing," Zoe said. "Will you have to move?" "No. They're setting it up here in the city so I can stay home with my mom." That was another big change. With the NASA scholarship money, Lisa Washington had been able to quit her night job. They had moved to a better apartment closer to the school, and Lisa had started taking nursing classes at the community college. "I'm proud of you," Lisa had told Jamal the night before. "Not because of NASA or the scholarship, but because you stayed true to yourself through everything." In physics class, Ms. Daniels gave Jamal special projects, while the other seniors took their test. Today, he was reviewing technical papers for her old research colleagues. "These scientists don't know a teenager is checking their work," Ms. Daniels had told him with a wink. "Just leave your comments with me." After school, a black car waited outside. Dr. Bennett had sent it to bring Jamal to the laboratory where they were beginning work on the first Washington Drive prototype. "See you tomorrow," Jamal called to Zoe. "I'll text you later about the science fair project." At the laboratory, scientists and engineers greeted Jamal like an equal. They had stopped being surprised by his knowledge weeks ago and now valued his input on complex problems. "We've set up the quantum field simulator," Dr. Bennett said, leading Jamal to a new section of the lab. "We can test your equations in virtual space before building the physical components." For hours, Jamal worked alongside physicists 3 times his age, adjusting formulas and testing variations. The simulation showed promising results, a small but measurable distortion in space-time using only moderate energy. "This could work," Dr. Lee said, studying the results. "The field is stable at these parameters. If we increase the field density," "Here," Jamal suggested, pointing to a diagram, "we might get better containment." They tried his suggestion and the results improved. "The Washington Drive is becoming more real every day," Dr. Bennett said with satisfaction. "Jamal, how does it feel to know you might change space travel forever?" Jamal looked around at the busy laboratory, all these brilliant people working on his idea. Just months ago, he had been hiding in a closet, afraid to show his intelligence. "It feels right," he answered simply. That evening, when the driver took Jamal home, he found his mother cooking dinner with a visitor, Principal Harris. "Jamal," Principal Harris said, standing to shake his hand. "I was just discussing your future with your mother. Westridge High wants to create a special advanced program based on your needs." Jamal nodded politely, but inside he felt uncomfortable. This was the same principal who had never noticed when Greg bullied him, who probably didn't even know his name before NASA came. "The school board is very excited," Principal Harris continued. "We could name it after you." "I don't need a program named after me," Jamal said quietly. "But other students might need help. Students who are different or struggling." Lisa put her hand on Jamal's shoulder, understanding in her eyes. "What my son means," she explained to Principal Harris, "is that all students deserve attention. not just the ones who win competitions. After dinner, Principal Harris left with promises of further discussions. Lisa and Jamal sat together on their small balcony, looking at the night sky. "I got a call from Colonel Adams today," Jamal said. "They want to fast-track the Washington drive development. If it works, they might use it on the next Mars mission." "My son's invention going to Mars," Lisa said, shaking her head in wonder. "When did you first know you were interested in space?" "Remember that book you got me when I was 6? About the solar system? That's when I started learning. I'd read at the library while you were working." Lisa wiped away a tear. "All these years. You were teaching yourself. I wish I could have helped more." "You did help," Jamal insisted. "You showed me what hard work looks like. You never gave up even when things were tough." The next morning at school, Jamal was called to the principal's office. He found Principal Harris waiting with a news reporter. "Jamal, this gentleman is from the Science Times. He's doing a feature on you in the Washington Drive." Jamal shook the reporter's hand. As they sat down for the interview, the reporter asked, "What inspired you to develop this revolutionary technology?" Jamal thought about the years hiding his intelligence, the bullying, the fear of standing out. Then he thought about his mother working 2 jobs, about Ms. Daniels noticing his potential, about Zoe standing up for him in the library. "I wanted to reach the stars," Jamal said. "And I realized the only way to do that was to stop hiding who I really am." As the interview continued, Jamal glanced out the window. In the hallway, he could see Greg watching from a distance, a mixture of respect and regret on his face. Their eyes met briefly before Greg turned away. The reporter's voice brought Jamal back to the moment. "And how does it feel to be recognized as a genius at such a young age?" Jamal smiled slightly. "I'm not sure I'm a genius. I just finally found the courage to be myself." 6 years had passed since the day Jamal Washington revealed his genius to the world. Now 20 years old, he stood in the control room at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, watching as technicians prepared for the historic launch. Dr. Jamal Washington, as everyone called him now, adjusted his glasses and checked the readings on the main screen. His Washington Drive, after years of development and testing, was about to power humanity's first mission to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system to Earth. "Final systems check complete," the mission controller announced. "The USS Discovery is ready for launch in 30 minutes. Jamal nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. His mother stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. Lisa Washington had watched her son change the world and still sometimes looked at him with wonder. "I still remember you working on your little desk in the closet," she whispered. "Now look at you," Jamal smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." Behind them, the room filled with NASA officials, government representatives, and special guests. Among them was Ms. Daniels, now retired from teaching but still sharp-eyed and proud. Jamal had insisted she receive a special invitation to the TIAO launch. "Dr. Bennett wants to speak with you," an aide said, approaching Jamal. In a quiet corner of the room, Dr. Olivia Bennett waited. Now the director of NASA, she had championed the Washington Drive project from the beginning. "The world is watching, Jamal," she said. "This mission will change humanity's future. How are you feeling?" "Ready," Jamal replied. "The drive will work." Dr. Bennett smiled. "I never doubted it. Not since that day at Westridge High when a 14-year-old corrected my equation." They were interrupted by a commotion at the control room entrance. Security officers were speaking with a man in a gas station uniform. "He doesn't have clearance," one officer said. "I just want to see Dr. Washington," the man insisted. "We went to school together." Jamal looked over, surprised to recognize Greg Peterson. 6 years had clearly been difficult for his former bully. Greg's face was tired, his shoulders slumped. "It's okay," Jamal told security. "He can come in." Greg approached hesitantly, not meeting Jamal's eyes. "I didn't think you'd let me in," he said. "I just wanted to see this, and to say I'm sorry for everything." Jamal studied the man who had once made his life miserable. "Why now, after all these years?" Greg shrugged. "I work at a gas station outside town. Every day I watch the news talk about Dr. Jamal Washington. The genius who changed space travel. The same kid I pushed around. He paused. My son asked for a book about you last week. He's 7. Wants to be a scientist. I hope he follows that dream, Jamal said after a moment. Greg nodded. I tell him he can be whatever he wants. I don't want him to be like I was. Before Jamal could respond, the mission controller called out, T-minus 15 minutes to launch. As Greg moved to the back of the room, Zoe Reynolds appeared at Jamal's side. Now studying astrophysics herself, Zoe had remained Jamal's closest friend through the years. The reporters want one final statement from you before launch, she said. Are you ready? Jamal took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Outside the control room, cameras and microphones waited. Jamal stepped forward, and the questions began immediately. Dr. Washington, how does it feel to make history today? What do you expect the Washington Drive to discover at Alpha Centauri? Any message for young scientists watching? Jamal raised his hand for quiet. Today isn't just about me or the Washington Drive. It's about what humans can achieve when we look beyond our prejudices and expectations. 6 years ago, I was just a kid that nobody believed in. Today, we're sending a ship to the stars. He looked directly into the cameras. To every young person watching who feels different or unseen, your mind is powerful. Your ideas matter. The world needs your unique perspective. Back in the control room, the final countdown began. The massive view screens showed the USS Discovery on its launch pad, gleaming in the morning sunlight. T-minus 10, 9, 8. Jamal stood between his mother and Ms. Daniels, with Zoe nearby. Even Greg watched from the back, his eyes wide with wonder. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. The conventional rockets fired first, lifting the Discovery from Earth. Once it reached orbit, the Washington Drive would activate, creating a controlled distortion in space-time that would propel the ship toward Alpha Centauri. Orbit achieved, the mission controller announced, preparing for Washington Drive activation. The room fell silent. This was the moment of truth. Would Jamal's invention work as designed? Activating Washington Drive in 3, 2, 1. On the screen, a beautiful ripple appeared around the USS Discovery, like water disturbed by a pebble. The ship seemed to stretch for a moment, then disappeared in a flash of blue light. Signal confirmed, the controller shouted as data streamed across the screens. The Washington Drive is functioning perfectly. The USS Discovery is on its way to Alpha Centauri. The control room erupted in cheers and applause. Jamal closed his eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. His closet laboratory experiments had led to this moment. Later that evening, after the celebrations and press conferences, Jamal stood alone on the observation deck, looking up at the stars. The Discovery was already far beyond what any human eye could see, carrying humanity's hopes toward another star for the first time. He heard footsteps and turned to see Ms. Daniels approaching. I always knew you were special, she said, standing beside him. Even when you were trying so hard not to be. Jamal smiled. I often wonder what would have happened if I had kept hiding. If I had never entered that NASA competition. You couldn't have hidden forever, Ms. Daniels said. Real genius finds a way to shine. They stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the stars. Then Jamal spoke again. I'm starting an education foundation next month. For gifted students who don't have resources or support. Kids like I was. A perfect way to give back, Ms. Daniels approved. What will you call it? Jamal thought about his journey from the scared boy in a closet laboratory to the scientist who opened the stars, to humanity. He thought about all the other hidden geniuses still waiting to be discovered. The Hidden Potential Foundation, he decided, because everyone deserves the chance to reach for the stars. As they turned to leave, Jamal took one last look at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Washington Drive was carrying human dreams farther than they had ever gone before. And back on Earth, perhaps another child was working in secret, waiting for their moment to change the world. The boy they had, harassed every day, had given humanity the stars. And now, he would help others do the same.